So next up, we have a really interesting speech. We will hear about a nonprofit foundation that designs and implements a decentralized data marketplace. So please welcome to the stage Marcus Jones, lead data scientist from Ocean Protocol.
Thank you. Caitlin, thank you. All right. Title slide. So I spent an hour making this video during the coffee break. I hope you appreciate it. So yes, my name is Marcus Jones, and it's great to be back here in Vienna. I was living here for approximately 10 years, and only recently moved to Berlin to work on this project called Ocean Protocol. And so this is, as Caitlin mentioned, a nonprofit foundation. The foundation is based in Singapore, so registered in Singapore, and it's being implemented by two companies, one company in Berlin, and that company is called BigChainDB, which is a blockchain company, and the second company is based in Singapore. So during the conference, we've heard a lot about the AI revolution. So we see better than human performance in a lot of tasks that are traditionally the sole domain of humans, so image recognition and speech recognition, etc. And there's another revolution which is going on, which is, of course, the blockchain technology, which has changed the way that we think about the internet. So if you think about Bitcoin, for example, who owns Bitcoin? Well, nobody and everybody. So that's an interesting new property which is evolving and coming onto the world stage. And there are, of course, newer blockchain technologies like Ethereum, which is a second generation, and there's third generation protocols, and it's all changing so quickly. So what happens when you put these two things together? This is the genesis of Ocean Protocol. And yeah, the other thing I wanted to just mention briefly is, as we're thinking about AI and machine learning, what are some of the common denominators? And one of the biggest ones that jumps out at you is actually that AI lives and eats data, and it wants more of it, and it wants lots of it, and it wants high-quality data, diverse data to solve these amazing problems that we have in the world. OK, so with that in mind, let me start my slideshow. So, and the keyboard shortcut doesn't work, so I'm going to have to find my pointer. Tell me if I'm close. OK. So Ocean Protocol is a decentralized data exchange protocol for the AI ecosystem. So decentralized, so that's what the blockchain brings to us. So it's completely the opposite of having a program running on a single server in a basement somewhere. It's running everywhere and controlled by everybody or nobody. Protocol, so we're a very low level. We're very low in the stack, so we are trying to standardize a way to unlock these AI assets, and one of the most important ones is data, for this new ecosystem of AI. So that's another word that I like to use recently, which is ecosystem. So ecosystem has properties like you have a lot of different entities and agents, and they interact in unique ways. It has some aspects of being anti-fragile. It's greater than the sum of its parts somehow. It has this dynamic equilibrium. So it's a very cool word to describe sort of what's coming up, I think. So yes, blockchain brings new superpowers to the internet, new ways of thinking about the internet, new ways of thinking about how to use this technology. So safety, security, transparency. And we want to enable this type of platform to enable providers and consumers of data and other assets. And we want to build Ocean Protocol. It's a completely open source project. You can go to GitHub right now and start contributing, forking, contributing with code or ideas. And what we have in mind is this protocol as a public utility. So that's another interesting concept. So Bitcoin, again, is not owned by any central authority. Similarly, that's how we envision Ocean. So yes, it's disruptive. You could also consider, yeah, you could build this with a central entity. You could build a marketplace, and you could call Amazon right now, and maybe they've already got something in the works, and maybe it's already there, I'm not sure. But this is another way to think about this, this AI ecosystem. So AI Commons. So that's another concept that we want to provide to unlock these data silos. So we have these huge data silos sitting in these big companies. They're sitting on this data, and we want to unlock all of these data silos and give more people more access to more data. And I like this graphic of a hierarchy of needs from Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So data science, again, lives on data. So it's very important to provide data to AI systems. OK, so we've seen this slide before. Data is the new oil. It's not the greatest metaphor. So data is the new oil in terms of, OK, it's very valuable. But it's also not the new oil in a lot of ways. So data is growing in volume, and oil is actually a limited resource. Data is also very heterogeneous. So you can't just distill it and easily distill it. Each domain has its own type of data. So automotive data, healthcare data, it's all very different. It all leads to a different way of processing data in different AI models. So we see that more data gives more accuracy, which yields more profit. And that's the USP of many companies, Facebook, Google, Amazon, et cetera. We've probably all seen this slide, which is that more data gives better results, especially with deep learning. So we have these really deep models with many hidden layers, and they have a lot of weights that can be tuned. And this graph, I'm looking for an updated graph on this concept if someone has any ideas, but this is from 2001. And it's really highlights this incentive to centralize data. So that's, again, Facebook, Google they want your data. They have your data, and they're not really telling you what they're doing with it. They're not really allowing you to have free access to this data. So blockchain is decentralizing, AI is centralizing. So that's another thing to think about. So on the one hand, lots of data, lots of compute, lots of resources. On the other hand, we have a lot of amazing AI problems and amazing expertise, some of which we've heard during the conference. So enterprises and startups, researchers, hackers, and in the middle, we have some lucky enterprises that are lucky enough to have both. So they have resources to collect the data, to hoard the data, and they also have the resources to hire top AI experts. And if you can project this then, into the future, we can see this monopolizing effect of data. So that's something that we're concerned about. So that's Ocean Protocol. We want to merge these two domains so that we can unlock these data silos. And that's the most exciting thing about this project is we don't really know what the results will be, but we hope that it's going to be really amazing. That if you can consider someone with an amazing AI solution, and all they lack is the data, then if we can somehow unlock that data and provide it to them, then think of all the amazing things that we can enable. So Ocean Protocol, first use case is as a data exchange platform. So if we can consider our basic AI machine learning pipeline, which we're all familiar with, so algorithm, compute into a trained model. What's missing is the data set. So you can consider that we would have a data marketplace where publishers would be able to sell their data. And if it's open source data or commons data, the price would be 0, for example. And we can also add some signaling. So is this data interesting for you via various means? So you could rank it. You could have expert curators to label your data for you, and a price. So one question is, what if I just take this data and I just bring it on a USB stick to my neighbor and sell it privately, or I can make a torrent out of it and just release it into the wild. So we are very concerned about that issue, and one solution that we're working on is to have the data stay on your premise. And as a data scientist, you would send your model to the premise. So let's say healthcare is one of the most salient examples. So healthcare data definitely cannot leave, and there can be no chance of your private medical data escaping, right? So this unlocks this potential of being able for you as a medical researcher to be able to train on this amazing medical data and actually save lives or research for different diseases. And so the idea is that, again, you would send your model to the premise would train the model and either give you the model or give you the predictions of that model. So again, back to this basic pipeline. So then if we generalize this, then we can start thinking about some new use cases. So data set is an asset. But what about the algorithm itself? That's also an asset, actually. Similarly, the trained model. After I train my model, so if I'm building a deep learning network in Keras, the result is an HD5 weights file. That's also an asset. And you can download, for example, VGG16 and ResNet on Keras at the command line. But there may be other models that you would like to use for transfer learning that you do not have access to. Or maybe you, as a data scientist, think that this trained model would be useful in another domain. Then the idea would be to put this onto Ocean Protocol. And so that everything is an asset, so that we have the data sets on Ocean Protocol, these pipelines, the resulting models, even compute can be sold as an asset on Ocean Protocol or exchanged. We also, on the blockchain, enable curation. So we can designate certain curators. These curators are rewarded with a token to curate the data sets. And you might trust certain curators and not trust others. Maybe you would like to whitelist certain ones and blacklist others. And we can interlink all of these different services, data sets, models, compute, transformers. And with the blockchain, this is one of the most powerful aspects of the blockchain, is that it's an incentive machine. So the blockchain can be used to align people's incentives, whereas right now, again, you could consider that Amazon could make a marketplace for this stuff. But do you really trust Amazon with your digital assets? Yes. So yeah, we don't know what it's going to look like, but we're really excited to see what happens. So I'm a data scientist, so I'm driving the project from the data science perspective. So just to briefly summarize, so a lot more data. So we want to just unlock this data. So if you're a startup, maybe you have a really cool data set that you uniquely created. And maybe you'd like to generate some extra revenue from that data. Or if you're an enterprise, you have some data, let's say you're an insurance company, and you have data that you have no real need for right now. Maybe it's outdated, maybe it's a few years old, but maybe you can still extract value. So what is the actual value of a data set right now? It's amazing that there's no real market for this. So again, with the blockchain, we want to be able to curate, to verify. So there will be validator nodes, which are incentivized to be experts and to be trusted experts. And if they become untrustworthy, you are able to stake against them, and therefore you can kick them off as actual verifiers. So blockchain, one of the amazing things about blockchain is that this data is persistent and immutable. So you can track where your data set has been used for all time. And that's part of this provenance aspect. So I know in big companies, if someone is building a new pipeline, they might use a certain transformation pipeline and a certain data set resulting in a certain model. And then this model might be used later for another thing, and this data set might be used for another thing. But sooner or later, a new person comes in after the old team leaves, and they're stuck with this mess of how did this model actually get trained? And by tracking this in the blockchain, we're able to rebuild that graph, and that's part of provenance. And the final aspect, of course, is incentive. So you're able to sell your assets, and you are therefore incentivized to produce high-quality assets and to create value in the marketplace. So it's a very exciting time at Ocean because we're releasing this evening, actually, our beta product. So that's going to be some of the core infrastructure. And what I'm doing is building on top of this. So I'm actually, I know that Jupyter Lab is a very cool project. So I do use this on occasion, and I really like this, the Jupyter Lab environment for documenting and providing really amazing documentation with code. So we're running a Kubernetes cluster with Jupyter Hub, and we're able to swap out different components. So we have a simulated testnet, so that's a simulated blockchain running in a single node, so not a decentralized blockchain, but a private blockchain. We would like to simulate against the actual Ethereum testnet, as well as finally the mainnet. And yeah, so we're using also the same notebook for tutorials and explaining. So you could take this notebook and basically fork it or just copy paste it and build your own example. And we're also using the same notebook for integration testing. And finally, because it lives in the browser, we want to integrate with MetaMask, which is the de facto online Ethereum wallet. So we can visit this link, and it will be live as of, I think, in 2 weeks. I'll be releasing this. But right now, it is just a demo. So you can go there, and you can spin up a Jupyter Lab instance. So that's, I think, very cool for data scientists. So we're at a devs conference, so I can talk about architecture finally. So we have, on the base layer, we have the parity Ethereum virtual machine, which is the blockchain layer. We also have a secret store. So consider a secret store like a vault. And you can store things in the secret store which you don't want anyone else to know unless they pay for access or you grant them access. So this is the way to keep your information private. So for example, you have a link to download your data set. You would store it in the secret store. And then we have different providers like Azure, Amazon, different cloud providers. So we do not store the data on the blockchain. I've gotten that question before. That's crazy. Don't do that. What we'd like to store is the metadata. So metadata means describing the data itself and signaling aspects like the price and the provenance. So that will be stored on the blockchain. So on top of this, we have APIs. So we're writing an API in Python, in JavaScript, and in Java. And then on the tier 3, so I'm on the right side, I'm working on the data science tools, so working in Python and Jupyter. And then we also have so that's one of the reasons we have the JavaScript APIs for fast web development. So the idea is that, again, we are a protocol, and essentially what we're working on is basically tier 1, and all the rest are reference examples of components that can be built on Ocean. So as developers, you are empowered to and encouraged to build a marketplace on Ocean or to build a data science environment using Ocean. So some applications. So some recent news. We have a collaboration with an initiative called the Mobility and Blockchain Initiative. And we have donated some Ocean tokens. So again, we are incentivizing with a token, and a token can be exchanged for fiat currency, for example. So automotive is a great example of where we would like to work on this no data escape, for example. So actually, where are the self-driving cars right now? It's a big challenge that we there's a lot of hype about self-driving cars, and we don't have them on the road. One big challenge is they need a lot more data than any single company is able to provide. So hence this initiative from companies like Toyota, Ford, and Bosch. They see the potential of having this type of marketplace where they can pool their data, and therefore together they can solve this problem of having a model, a deep learning model or whatever it is, a system that can actually reliably and safely drive autonomously. So we have a very good contact and partnership with this group, and they're hoping to build their marketplace on top of Ocean. And again, this is one example of a marketplace. Obviously, automotive companies have very different incentives and different goals compared to, for example, United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And this is another example. We have coming the AI for Good, which is sponsored by the United Nations, and a former X-Prize or a current X-Prize director is driving this forward. So in the AI for Good initiative, they're looking for solutions to these Sustainable Development Goal challenges. So there's 17 different Sustainable Development challenges, which are very pressing. And this is why we're very inspired to build this product so that people can use these data sets that might be locked in enterprises and in agencies and solve some of these problems. And again, the next initiative coming out of this group is this AI Commons. And this is, again, to build this basically a platform where AI and digital assets are essentially a public utility. So it's for everybody, it's common. So those are a couple examples, and there's several other companies that are very interested in working with us. OK, that's already done. So as I mentioned, we have our first, let's say, beta, I guess. So what we are releasing now is the smart contract layer. So in Ethereum, when you're programming in Ethereum, you're programming smart contracts. That's the term in Ethereum. So that's the type of thing that we're releasing. So we have a concept of a service execution agreement, which can be chained to build up new types of access agreements. And if you are interested in the blockchain and Ethereum space, then I definitely encourage you to check out our repos. And then, so our main target is Q2 next year to release on the Ethereum mainnet. So lots of ways to collaborate and contribute. So you can participate in the marketplace, of course. You could also, if you're inclined, you could build a marketplace and try to extract value from that or build value from that. You could also be an infrastructure provider running a full node in Ethereum. Lots of work in open source contribution is welcome. And of course, any other challenges and problems that are out there, we're happy to hear about them. So we also have a program to become an ambassador, which means to represent Ocean in different events. We also have bounties. So we have several bounties which have been completed. The last one, I think, was someone built Elasticsearch capability into our protocol. And there are many other bounties open. And please just approach me after the talk. Marcus Jones is my name. And there's our social media. So thank you for listening, and happy to receive any questions.
So thank you, Marcus. That was a really fascinating presentation. Let's do a bit of questions. So the most high-ranking one says, what is the business reason why big companies would share their precious data with everybody?
So if your business and your data is your only unique selling point, then don't share your data. But if you think you can generate revenue from that data, then at least you have the potential to share it. So absolutely, it's not for everybody, definitely. So some companies will not share their data. But once let's take an example of, like again, so we have these monopolies like Amazon, Google, Facebook, and they're monopolies in the sense that they're incentivized to hoard their data. And so one question is, how do you start competing against such a thing? There's such a huge gap. And the idea with Ocean Protocol is that at least this gives us a chance to, let's say, we could also consider pooling our data together. So maybe a big company that's specialized only in advertising, which is exactly what Google and Facebook are doing, maybe now we can pool our resources a bit more efficiently and therefore democratize this process a bit more.
OK. All right, then moving on to the next question. No data set is complete, and you need to know the nuances of a data set in order to evaluate the outputs. How can you get this understanding with the firewall?
So we have, it's true. One solution here is you provide a sample of the data. The second possibility is we will provide a template, which is a generator of data. So if you consider a data set which has a certain statistical distribution on each of the columns, like a tabular data set, then you can create a generator which takes that data set and then builds a model or an algorithm, essentially, which then we send to you, and then you use this to generate data, which is statistically the same, but it's been completely obfuscated. So you don't actually see the real data, you see this generated data. That's one solution to that problem.
OK.
If that makes sense, yeah.
Cool. Let's do 2 more questions. In your bring model to the data diagram, aren't you forcing researchers to expose their models to the data holders?
Yeah, that's right. So the other iteration on that is no model escape. So then you would need a third-party trusted host, right? And we know that Microsoft, for example, has secure hardware. And if you trust that hardware, so eventually you're going to have to trust somebody, right? So if we consider then a third party, which will do the compute, so the data provider sends their data in there, and you as a data scientist, you send your model there. The model trains on that data. You get back your weights, and the data is never seen by you. And likewise, the data provider does not see your model. So that's one way to approach that.
OK. All right, so the last question. Which would you like to answer better? Because we're ranking 2, with one has to do with, for instance, GDPR. And the other is, what is the added value of using the blockchain?
Both GDPR questions, awesome.
Yeah, actually.
So yes, GDPR. So again, we're not storing any actual data on the blockchain. We're only storing a reference to that data. And so that's one way around that one. The next one, added value of using a blockchain. Yes, it does work as I mentioned before, it does work in a traditional marketplace, and Amazon could build a marketplace tomorrow for data. But we're making a bet that this will disrupt that. So we think that the blockchain enables all of these new ways of thinking about the internet and new ways of thinking about how to interact and collaborate. So trustless, decentralized ways of building a marketplace that, again, is owned by all of us together as a community. So that's what Ocean Protocol is betting on.
OK. Just one more, because out of my own personal interest as well. So we see that the one with Ocean Protocol has raised through ICO. I can't find token details anywhere. You mentioned that the company donated 1 million through tokens.
That's correct. We have done a pre-sale ICO, and there will be another ICO upon mainnet release. That's right, and that's the foundation that is organizing that ICO.
OK, perfect. So thank you, Marcus, again.
Thank you.
Please, if your question was not answered, please find Marcus in front of the stage. He will be here, and ask him further questions. And we will regroup at 2:30. So thank you again. Please give Marcus a big round of applause.